JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So related to the self-employed PPP loan forgiveness, that Schedule C filer, I have some good news, some probably stress relieving news for you if you haven't heard it yet, but it's this. You are not an employee and you don't have payroll. Now wait a second, what? Huh? Because on PPP, might be what you're thinking, on the PPP Loan Forgiveness Application for the Paycheck Protection Program, it says that I have to put my payroll down. Well, if you don't have any employees and the PPP that you got was based on you being self-employed, filing a Schedule C, and this is the same for Schedule F filers, your payroll is just a calculation. So what you have to do is get the word payroll out of your head. And what I want you to focus in on is that when you look at the Form 3508S, which is what you're going to be filing to get PPP loan forgiveness, there's a line that says, what is your PPP loan and what is your forgiveness? Okay? So I'm not going to give you a cheat here. I want you to continue to listen and I want you to hear me properly. But when you're calculating your forgiven amount, okay, should just be the same as what you got, but when you calculate the forgiven amount, you look at your Schedule C for 2019 and for 2020, and you get to use the higher of either one of those years. You look at line 31, you divide it by 12 times 2.5, and that's your forgiveness amount. Now, if you were lucky enough to be a Schedule C filer that got the PPP and you were able to use line 7 of your Schedule C, then your forgiveness amount is line 7 on either 2019 or 2020, whatever is higher. So it'd be line 7 divided by 12 times 2.5. That's your forgiveness amount. Now, with that, for Schedule C filers that don't have any employees, whatever that forgiveness amount calculation is that you came up with, for you as a Schedule C filer, self-employed, that is the same amount that you put in for the payroll. So I'm going to put in the body of the video here links to the IRS and to the SBA that back up the fact that you don't have payroll. Payroll is to employees. So the IRS, in the link that I give you to the Schedule C instructions, this is how clear it is. The IRS says you, as a self-employed Schedule C filer, same for Schedule F, are not an employee. You can't determine, or you can't classify yourself as an employee. And in fact, if you paid yourself W-2 wages, you don't get to deduct those W-2 wages on Schedule C because you are not an employee. So it's not possible for you to have payroll. The other thing I'm giving you a link to is the SBA instructions FAQ to getting PPP loan forgiveness. And I'm going to even tell you what pages to look on either link. But the SBA says for self-employed Schedule C, Schedule F filers, you take, and for Schedule C, it's line 31 of Schedule C, that's your net, line 31 of your Schedule C, either 19 or 20, divide it by 12 times 2.5, boom, that's your forgiveness amount, and that's your payroll amount. I do get it. It's confusing because on the PPP loan forgiveness application, it doesn't have any different wording for the self-employed, the Schedule C or Schedule F filer. What you have to do, though, is just realize is that that's just a term that the SBA is using on a PPP loan forgiveness application. So you're not an employee, you don't have payroll. The other way I can prove to you that you're not an employee and you don't have payroll, assuming you have no employees, okay, is that when you look, and you just have to read it, and that's what you can tell your bank. Let's actually read the instructions that are right on the form 3508S, and it talks about the documentation to prove your payroll. And it says payroll forms. We can stop right there because you don't have any payroll forms. What are payroll forms? They are defined as, by the IRS, forms used to file a Form W-2, which includes then a Form 941 and a Form 940. These are all things that are then filed with the IRS, a Form W-3. If you don't have those forms, which you don't have those, because if you're self-employed, you're a Schedule C filer, you're not an employee, you can't pay yourself wages. You don't have those forms. There are not those forms to provide. Now, what's clear in the SBA link that I give to you is that it says for Schedule C filers, here's your payroll documentation. Schedule C, line 31, divided by 12 times 2.5. And again, if you got PPP based on line 7 of Schedule C, well then your forgiveness amount, your payroll amount, same amount, is line 7 divided by 12 times 2.5. So the banks, unfortunately, some of them, are still telling self-employed individuals, Schedule C filers, well, we need your payroll. You can say, well, I don't have employees and I'm not an employee. I don't have a Form 941, a 940, and a W-2 and a W-3. But right here, bank, here's a link to the SBA bank. The SBA is the one determining the forgiveness. The SBA is the one that's making the guidelines. The SBA says for Schedule C filers, the self-employed, as well as Schedule F, it's just my form with a calculation. So to recap, when you're filling out what was my PPP loan amount? You know what that is on your Form 3508S, the PPP Loan Forgiveness Application. Don't then get stuck on the line that comes below that of, what was your payroll amount? Just skip right over, because we're going to come back to it. You're going to skip right over and just calculate your forgiveness amount. And what's your forgiveness amount? We just went over it. Okay? It's either 2019 or 2020, whatever's higher, of Schedule C, line 31, divided by 12 times 2.5. If you got it based on line 7, right, it's just line 7 divided by 12 times 2.5. That's your forgiveness amount, period. But see, for you as a Schedule C filer, that's the same amount that you would then list for payroll. So if your bank's insistent on it, I've counseled a few to say, well, why don't you send this link to the bank and just say, hey, listen, I'm not an employee according to Schedule C, right here in the instructions, yo. And here's a link to the SBA. They're the ones that are actually doing PPP, yo. And with this link, you will see right here from the SBA, black and white, that for a Schedule C filer, I just produce my Schedule C or my Schedule F. I don't produce or give you any details related to payroll because you don't have any. It sounds like it's too easy, and that's why I think almost the banks don't get it a little bit, because I've been surprised at how off base the banks have been related to this. Now, why don't you be clear on this for you as a self-employed, is that bank wants you to get forgiveness. Why? Because they don't get their money from the SBA until it gets forgiven by the SBA, and then they also get their fee. So the bank's on your side. So it shouldn't be seen as it's you against the bank, right? What it can be is that you and the bank are working together to achieve forgiveness from the SBA. Now, bankers are just doing the best that they can. So if they come back to you and they're like, well, no, I need this, and it says I need this, and I said I need this, what you have to remember is what they're providing to you is what they've come up with internally, unless they're giving you SBA documentation. And there's no way that it's possible that they're giving you SBA documentation telling you to do anything other than provide your Schedule C or Schedule F. Why? Because you have the SBA documentation in hand with the link that I gave you below, showing you what it is that you provide. The SBA makes everything public. There is nothing, not even with the banks and the SBA, nothing between them that is secret or you can't see. If you literally go to the SBA website and you click on the PPP section, which I'll give you a link to that as well, you will see everything that the SBA tells the banks, every rule, every regulation. So it's not possible for a bank to even tell you, well, but our regulations, and then the SBA said this and it said that. Okay. Well, I tell you what, bank, can you just send that to me? Could you send me those rules and regulations? Because I'm not finding them on the website. So again, you and the bank are working together, but it seems as though some of the banks with the self-employed and Schedule C filers, they're getting a little confused, and it's a little baffling, and it should be a little embarrassing, to be honest with you, that a bank who's making some decent coin off PPP, okay, for just being really nothing more than a mediator, go-between ATM machine, is not being as knowledgeable as I would think they should be as it relates to the Schedule C, Schedule F, self-employed filer getting that PPP loan forgiveness. So I just want you to get it all forgiven. You should, right? Again, your full forgiveness amount is just a calculation. What is it on your form? What's the calculation? That's what it is. There is no other documentation for you to provide. This is again assuming you have no employees. You're not paying any W-2 employees. All right, hey, I hope that helps. Again, I'm putting links in the body of this. I will tell you this though, if you've made it to here and you're not a subscriber, there's no way I didn't provide some value to you. So do me a favor and click subscribe and maybe a thumbs up. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. You have a great one.